Gauntlet is an immersive choral experience. The audience walks upstream as people are passing tones and phrases downstream. You're walking through a river of melody and harmony and chordal movement. The Gauntlet collapses the choir back into individuals. You really hear the personalities of each singer, and you feel the tension of communication.
We've done the Gauntlet on the High Line in New York, in the town of Fredrikstad in Norway, at National Sawdust in Brooklyn, at the Cleveland Museum of Art, at the Sydney Opera House, and most recently at Rockefeller Center.
Sydney Opera House is really a jumping off point for it being a much larger choral action, a much larger community sonic action. It really felt like the first steps of a new era.
My name is Coco Karol. I am one of the co-creators of the Gauntlet, along with my husband and artistic partner.
My name is Sxip Shirey. I'm the director, co-creator, and composer of the Gauntlet. The Gauntlet has many aspects, but the root action is someone passes a tone to someone else as if it's a physical object. The conductor stands on one end and sings a tone to the person to the right. That person takes that physical object and passes it down. So instantly, I can create all kinds of chord clusters. I then pass phrases.
Open the curtain, the curtain, the curtain, the curtain. Let the light, let the light, let the light shine.
So you get all these phrases being passed down, and I'm creating harmonies with them, and it creates this primitive form of minimalism. The Gauntlet evolved after I had done 2 years with Limbo, a production by Strut and Fret out of Melbourne. I was living a circus, punk, rock star lifestyle. Came back to New York, and what am I gonna do next? At the prodding of Carmen Lara Ellie from the Norwegian Theatre Academy, I decided to manifest this concept of an immersive choral instrument. I was asked by Make Music New York to do it for the High Line. I had recently met Coco Karol, and I was interested in working with her as a choreographer, and we put this piece together.
I wasn't supposed to be a part of the High Line Gauntlet. This was Sxip's own thing. We were working on a separate project called Latency.
Coco and I were not partners during the First Gauntlet. We were just becoming artistic partners, so that really came first.
We were supposed to have a rehearsal for Latency, or he wanted to show me something or run something by me, and he was working with one of the Gauntlet singers. He had also just found a pair of these red high-heeled shoes on the street that happened to be exactly my size, and I only wear red shoes. And so I put them on and I started dancing around the singer, and he was like, "Oh, you have to be a part of this."
The first Gauntlet was about the ambient snippets of conversation you hear while walking in New York. We literally walked down the High Line with notebooks, and we wrote down all the little bits of conversations we heard. It was all hocketed, so you'd have two singers. One would sing a syllable, the next would sing a syllable, and they would ping pong the whole melody line back and forth. It was pretty thrilling. to work together for the first time. When I met Coco, she brought so much energy. She has really brought the heart to it.
Sing me up.
Norway, I get to teach at Norwegian Theatre Academy. I get to be a guest artist there. Because we're creating these overlapping harmonies. So it's the school that I wish that I had when I had graduated from high school.
When we were in Norway, we were teaching a workshop to first-year students there and also building and creating an original piece for the 450th anniversary of the town of Fredrikstad. That was performed in the Old City on December 6th, I remember the date, and it was so cold that the cameras froze. So in Norway, it was the first time that the movement interviews had really fed the Gauntlet process. I felt a real potential for what this project could become. Language becomes a poetic vehicle for expressing much larger ideas about embodied memory and phenomenological experience. I started to deepen my artistic practice and really start to use art and dance as a form of cultural anthropology. I wanted to use dance to ask questions about how we make meaning of our experience.
We're doing a rehearsal right here with Chris Ignacio, who's helped out with the Gauntlets in the past. Coco says, let me try this thing. And she starts moving with Chris and she says, imagine you walk into your childhood bedroom. What do you see? And he describes what he says. And immediately I think, oh, that's great lyrics.
He grabbed a pen and paper and started writing down the language that was coming from the movement interview.
At that moment, everything changed because my whole concept with the Gauntlet is that it services the community you do it for. So initially I was thinking, oh, you can hire some poets to write something, you get a local writer. But this is so much better because the community supplies their own story.
What does it mean to get your hands dirty in your work?
Oh, I love it. It's going out on a van. It's doing the things that aren't sitting at my desk.
Yeah.
It's being in the kitchen with our kids.
A movement interview is a way that I developed, a methodology, if you will, that uses movement and a poetic line of questioning to ask questions of one's physical experience.
By being able to extend the amount of activity and the time that one has to interface with society and other people creates more possibility.
It comes from this idea that we have memory throughout our whole body and that we experience our lives through our whole body and not just with language and not just in our dominant senses.
You go up 3 flights. And there's this tiny little window that is just, when you look at it, you can see the Opera House, you can see the Harbour Bridge, you can see Centrepoint Tower. There's lots of landmarks everywhere.
Questions are addressed to their physical experience and addressed to their bodies in movement.
Take me to your childhood home and just describe it to me.
Oh, okay. It's in Somerville.
Okay.
Which is down south of Frankston, and it's a herb farm. And so
I hear things differently when I'm transcribing. Things take on more meaning for me. And then also as I'm re-listening, I'm listening for what would be good to distill for the libretto of the Gauntlet. places that hold a particular poetic tension between shared and personal experience, so that when someone's walking through the language in the Gauntlet, they are hearing something that will resonate for them.
If you were to imagine the future of all this effort for your daughter?
Well, she's going to have to be a lot more resilient than we are. I think we know it's just going to get really hot here, and change is going to be more and more frequent. It's just trying to, I guess, build that, make sure that there's a richness of soil in the city that can accommodate not just her, but a whole lot of people to be able to, you know, make things happen.
Yeah, with lots of microbes.
Heaps of microbes, like the more the better.
The subjects for the interviews were an amazing group of artists, activists, and changemakers curated by Olivia Ansel and folks at the Sydney Opera House.
Well, as an artist, my job is to tell lies and make you believe them.
Tell me a lie and make me believe it.
Need the sea to drown. We don't need the sea to drown.
There was this bright light, and it kind of descended from the sky right in front of the cave that I was sitting in. And out of that light stepped this god.
You will drown in me.
We don't need the sea to drown. It's a one-line poem.
I drown in you, you drown in me. We're drowning each other, and that it's time for human behavior to change. Foregrounding that statement and bringing it to the surface and singing it very clearly, so much of the implications of the current moment can be felt in both personal and shared way.
In the back foyer overlooking the water, we created a labyrinth.
I could drown right here. I could drown. I could drown right here.
Singers stood on stools in a maze-like formation, and the audience walked through at their own pace.
I could drown right here.
I sang the Australian national anthem, Into the Gauntlet. Then we took language from the movement interviews on refugee and immigrant experiences and passed those through the gauntlet.
I walk differently here.
I walk differently here.
Across every border.
It was really the immigrant stories being passed through the labyrinth that I think really affected the audience, affected me, and affected the people who gave that language.
I remember when I was 1 year old.
An earthquake.
When I was like 1 year old, there was a huge earthquake.
An earthquake at 5 a.m.
Everybody ran out from their houses. And I thought that was absolutely beautiful. We're all sitting in a park, finally a picnic.
It feels like it was like a folk art form. And the Sydney Opera House is the next step into whatever it's becoming.
So many people in Midtown. I miss the spatial awareness that New Yorkers used to have, even as it seemed like they weren't paying any attention to all the bodies around them. They still were paying attention, and you could tell that they were by the way they navigated each other. And there was this incredible oceanic slipstream of people moving in between each other and making space for each other. It was all so intentional. Like, it's an entire city of incredibly spatially aware people.
I see the activity actually in the city as streams of light, of people's energies. The energy in the city, the energy in life. I feel like I see it in motion, color.
After the Sydney Opera House, I was very hungry to do the Gauntlet again and hopefully do it in a bigger way. The Gauntlet has gotten a lot of support from National Sawdust, which is this amazing venue for contemporary performance in Brooklyn. And it became one of National Sawdust's projects. The producer there was Holly Hunter, and Holly reached out and pulled from all these different choirs in New York City. And suddenly, this was really taking the Gauntlet to the next level. 200 singers, a huge Labyrinth gauntlet, 2 hallway gauntlets, and 3 mini circle gauntlets happening simultaneously.
Once we had the formula from Sydney, we could use it to hold the thematic concept. And now the thematic concept can change wherever we go. And so for Rockefeller Center, the theme was about transformation. But really what that became is about New York and about New Yorkers and about when you live in a city that's always changing, what that experience is.
Well, it's interesting because I've been in New York my whole life, and it's a very different city now than it was when I was a kid. It was always a little bit dangerous, and as a result now when I'm in New York, there's nothing that scares me. I made it through something way harder than anything that can happen now.
I think the transformation happens from a curious mind, and if your perspective is open and flexible and soft, then it opens up new windows to maybe look at the same thing differently.
Whatever the themes are initially, they end up kind of shifting to whatever the General Society is talking about. The subject of immigration and home and displacement, that's what the world is singing about. That's what the world is talking about.
I was 10.
10, coming from
Taiwan.
Do you remember the first things you saw when you arrived?
I remember the airport, and I remember my parent bought me a necklace with a heart on it. And then it had like it was the first time my name was written in English. I had a new name almost because it was like, I had a different identity.
The first thing I saw was a necklace with a heart and my name. The first thing I saw when I came to New York was a necklace with a heart and my name.
I think there's a real deep appreciation and a sense of being honored and included, especially when the stories are stories that should be told and that have been untold, or stories that have been rewritten or erased. There's a sense of like being seen. There are a few next gauntlets that are sort of up in the air. One of those gauntlets is for Abu Dhabi, NYU. Recall in your body and in your movement a time when you were a child, when you realized you were alone. I have been doing virtual interviews online.
When I was 5, I loved playing on the monkey bars. And I would practice like crossing the monkey bars. And I remember actually having a lot of blisters on my palms.
For that gauntlet, the theme is specific to how we are creating and maintaining connection at this time of social distance.
Bard College in upstate New York has talked to us about doing a gauntlet. We discussed doing it with megaphones in a big field. We even went there and did a test, singer singing to singer with megaphones. I always knew that this project would be something that became bigger and bigger.
It kind of pushes back against this single point perspective of history and narrative. I think that it would be really interesting to see where someone else would take it.
The gauntlet is about generosity. How generous can we make it in melodically? How generous can we make it in wonderment?
If it could service communities, especially in ways where like we couldn't possibly come in and be the authors of those stories. I think like any interview, a movement interview is totally shaped by who asks the questions and who answers the questions. And someone else will have different impulses and different responses.
I see the gauntlet as a form of folk music. I define folk music as music that people make for their immediate community using the materials from their immediate community. But like most folk music, it evolves into the culture. Hopefully, it'll evolve beyond me.
Sea